Good afternoon. My job, as Jim said, is to drill down a little bit. And so I want to talk to you very specifically this afternoon about a cancer research program at Auburn. So what I don't want is all of those of you in the room who are artists or engineers or somehow think that cancer doesn't apply to you or cancer research doesn't apply to you to tune out or go get coffee. For two reasons. One, I think this serves as a good example, regardless of your discipline, of how to put a program together that is interdisciplinary and that causes people who aren't used to working with each other to actually get together and start to work together. And secondly, I think cancer is important to all of you, and we'll talk a little bit as I go along about how that kind of impacts our program. So the first thing I need to say about this program is that it is entirely serendipitous, but it's based upon a strong foundation. The short story is that essentially in early 2011, a number of us faculty got phone calls or emails from our Associate Dean for Research saying, can you give me a few words about the cancer research you do? I have a funding opportunity. That sounds like magic. I like that. Funding opportunities are always good. You know, money's hard to come by. So all of us, and there were lots of us doing cancer research, sat in our offices completely independently of each other and penned a few words about our projects and about how great they were. What I didn't know at the time was that concurrent with that, the state legislature of Alabama was discussing the next year's budget. And it turns out that the good foundation that was built was that our legislative liaison, a person named Sherry Fulford, had actually made sure that our legislators knew about one of the new cancer research programs that was happening at the College of Veterinary Medicine in breast cancer, and it was NIH funded, which for Auburn was a big deal. So we let them know. In the discussions that were ongoing, the medical schools in Alabama, Auburn does not have a medical school. We have a veterinary school. We do not have a human medical school. The two medical schools were divvying up direct funding for cancer research. And our legislator said, wait, my constituents, Auburn University, does cancer research. I think they should be involved. And turned to his people, who turned to our people, who called the dean, who called in the associate dean, who called on his faculty and said, help, I need some things, and I need them by lunch, it's 10 o'clock. He then penned about 11-sentence email that went back to our legislative liaison, that went back to the legislature, and nothing else happened for weeks and months. September 2011 rolls around. The state budget comes out, and there's a $1 million line item to the College of Veterinary Medicine for breast cancer research. Dang, that was easy. The ADR says that's the easiest $1 million he's ever gotten. It's because we did all the work. We wrote the sentences. He just put them together. So we have a problem. It's a good problem, but it's a problem. We have $1 million sitting on the table. It's a state budget. It starts October 1. It ends September 30th. We've got to do something about spending that money. And we have to do it in a way that seems reasonable and appropriate and focuses on our ability to do the job well. We want to be rigorous, all those things that you guys know. At the time, I believe Tim Businger was the dean, and Calvin Johnson was, they were swapping places as interim dean and acting interim provost. And so both deans, both Calvin Johnson and Tim Businger have been involved in this effort. A strategic planning committee was put together shortly before October 1st, faculty committee. That committee instantly recognized that this could not be a College of Veterinary Medicine effort, that it had to be much broader than that. Certainly in the world of biological and health research, we know that interactive, interdisciplinary groups are much more likely to be funded than our pure, straight groups that focus on a single science. That's just the way we live right now. And so we instantly started to bring in groups from outside. So we brought in the College of Pharmacy, we brought in the College of Engineering to this planning committee to start putting together a plan. This faculty-based committee drew up a strategic plan in less than 2 months. I thought, right? That's pretty impressive, actually. The group worked very hard, generated a strategic plan, and for a faculty committee, I think that is very impressive that we were able to get that done. That involved not just that committee getting together, but also involving stakeholder groups, holding open houses, public meetings, those kinds of things, campus-wide, to get people to know that there was this funding opportunity available and that we had some control over how this process went. So we were able to get that input, formulate a plan. Eventually, by January of 2001, we officially began the program. And as I say, this is based on appropriations from the state of Alabama, about $1.1 million a year now. $100,000 of that is earmarked specifically because our senator decided that $100,000 is a non-budgetable item, but he could put it onto a $1 million item and it would work. And that goes to our MRI facility, which has engendered new collaborations because now MRI has $100,000 in my budget, and I talk to them every week and every month about how can we involve more cancer researchers in the use of our MRI facility. So it's really had an unintended consequence beyond just funding those MRI folks. What we decided to take was a deliberate and thoughtful, a logical approach to funding cancer research at Auburn University. As I said, lots of people were doing cancer research. That wasn't the problem. It's that we were all in our own little silos, as we've used that word many times. We were all working somewhere and not talking to each other, and we had no idea what was going on in different colleges across the entire program. We wanted to leverage these funds. $1 million is a lot to some people. It's nothing to other people. We wanted to make that grow. We needed sustainability. That is, how do we turn $1 million in state funding into $10 million in extramural funding, or 20 million or 50 million? How do we grow that funding, grow that research? This isn't a program that's about lifelong funding for researchers in a laboratory. This is money that's supposed to bootstrap you up and get you out there into the big wide world of extramural funding and be more competitive. It had to be interdisciplinary. We had to work on collaborative groups, and we wanted a rigorous but constructive review process. Those of you who've been through NSF, NIH, other review processes know that that process is often rigorous. But for new faculty in particular, it can be somewhat destructive. It can be very disappointing to get those reviews back. And a lot of our review processes now are run by people who have that experience. But then we add an extra step in and say, here's your NIH-style review. Please address these questions within the next month and get back to us. So it's a little bit friendlier review process. Just because you get a negative review doesn't mean you're out of the cycle. Maybe you can make that better. Right now, we're at 175 members. Of those, I think 77 right now are faculty. We encompass 9 of the colleges and schools out of 12. My goal is to make it 12 out of 12. There's no reason for that not to be the case. How many of you out there, if I can have a show of hands, have been touched in some way by cancer? Almost unanimous. Okay? The same is true across academia. There are reasons why we can involve everyone in cancer research, whether they're a molecular biology major, an engineer, a mathematician, or an artist. Right now, we have direct continuing collaborations with 5 other universities, both within the US and internationally. We have multiple collaborations established with biotech. For example, we have a number of new clinical trials at the College of Veterinary Medicine. And so we look at our platform as ways of translating technology all the way from the benchtop to the bedside, using this One Health approach where veterinary medicine and human medicine aren't distinguished, but we think instead about medicine or One Health. For example, this is a clinical trial in a Rottweiler with osteosarcoma. This is an invention that came out of benchtop research and is now being applied in the dog, and we hope will be translated to human patients. To give you an idea of the involvement across Auburn, this is just one of those word graphs that shows different departments and even different universities involved, like University of Alabama, Birmingham. It's a little bit of a cheat because pharmacy is a complete college, as is, but pathobiology and DCS and APP are all departments in the vet school. So you can see, though, that there's involvement across the campus because there are lots of different departments involved: chemistry, chemical engineering, psychology, nursing. Lots of different individuals all across the breadth of our campus are involved in this program. We have some interesting advantages. It's making lemonade out of lemons in some ways. The first thing that came up when our legislators brought up this issue of funding cancer research was, the Cow College does cancer research? Because kind of colloquially, that's what we're known as, particularly by the other school in Alabama. And the answer is yes, we do, because we have this One Health perspective. Because animals get cancer. Dogs get cancer. Dogs get the same kind of cancers as people do. They get them with the same kind of frequencies. They have some of the very same responses to treatment. The thing that's a little bit different about dogs is that they're time compressed. Their lives are shorter than ours. Their tumor development happens more rapidly. And the outcomes can be determined more quickly. And things we look at in dogs can easily translate to things that we look at in people, for example. We can also take things in people and look at them in dogs. So we can make that a two-way street. We can take that strength of a large College of Veterinary Medicine with a tremendous potential and use that to help build the entire program. And in this case, this is our new hospital. This is the artist rendition. I need to substitute a new photograph because it's completed. And it's a wonderful facility with devoted oncology suite and really a top-notch place to bring an animal to when you're interested in getting cutting-edge oncology therapy. Okay, so how do we establish an interdisciplinary team? This is probably, I mean, this is the $99 question or the $9 million question. So I'll tell you how you don't, okay? You don't put people in a room, close the door, and tell them they have to collaborate. You can't just gather everybody up and say, okay, you must, because one size does not fit all. You can't just make people do this. It isn't going to work. So how do you do it? Well, the carrot. The carrot works great. Money. All the administrators are like, oh. But honestly, money works. It works. It has worked on the federal level for years. If you want to get people involved in breast cancer research, you create a specially funded Department of Defense allocated breast cancer research program, which goes instantly from being nothing to being way oversubscribed with grants, because there's money there, and you want to get that money. So my interest is pulled by the fact there's money available. Okay? So we make money available. What do we say, though? We have requirements. We make most of these grants require interdisciplinary teams. In other words, we're not really into funding individuals working in their laboratory in isolation. That's not the research model that the world expects anymore, and it's certainly not the one we want to fund. Typically, that means multiple departments or colleges. Really, it means multiple colleges. We want to see that a collaboration across college boundaries. But really what it means is we want to see multiple disciplines. So if two disciplines are closely aligned but across college boundaries, whereas within a college we have two disparate disciplines, we might actually view the two disparate disciplines together in a grant within one college more favorably than two molecular biologists in two different colleges getting together to talk. The emphasis is on, we emphasize to our reviewers in their briefing and in their scoring rubrics that this is critical. That's really the carrot, okay? And we really want to encourage that crossover research. Someone in engineering thinking about the biological system, someone in biology thinking about therapeutics, someone in pharmacy thinking about the basic science and not just the drug delivery. So those are the kinds of crossovers that we really like to see. How do we get these people together? That's probably the biggest issue that we all face. And a number of ideas have already come across in this room, and I think they're all very valid. Again, that one size fits all does not work. So one of the ones that's become popular is speed dating. That's the 5 minutes where you get to tell somebody all about what you do, and then they get to tell you all about what they do, and maybe you hit it off and maybe you don't. It's kind of inefficient. Some scientists are very gregarious and love this kind of stuff. Others will stay in their laboratories and shut the door and have nothing to do with it. Time to talk, places to talk. That's a huge problem right now. I don't know about every university in the SEC, but Auburn for years has built buildings that are non-collaborative. That is the model that we know, that is what we build. There is no spot in the hallway to sit down and have coffee. There is no empty alcove. There is no chalkboard in the hallway. There's nothing that encourages you and your compatriots to simply say, as you walk by, hey, I had a question for you. Let's work on this. Do you have 5 minutes? Because we don't have the place and we don't have the 5 minutes. So this is a really critical issue, is to establish times and places where you can get people to actually just talk and say, I had this great idea. I don't really know how to do it. Can you help me? I know how to do this. I need technology that I don't have. Do you have the technology? Those kinds of discussions build those collaborative teams. Obviously, you know, classic academic environment seminars are one way to do that. The problem is that you have to get people to the seminar. They look at the title, they say, well, that's not my field of interest. I don't know why I should go to something about, you know, bubble formation in wine. I work on cancer therapy. when maybe bubble formation in wine has a sort of a hint of an idea about nucleation of particles and some particle physics or gas physics that might actually apply to delivering a drug in a novel way. Trying to get people to think across those boundaries can be a major challenge. The first step is often just making them aware that the seminar might be interesting. So if you're sitting in a biology laboratory and you never hear about that physics seminar that could be interesting, you never go to it. So part of it is just a communication issue, just letting people know, hey, this is what's going on. And oftentimes that's something that a program like ours can do, so that I can identify all these things that are going on campus and send them out to our members and say, hey, you might not think this is interesting, but it could be. We just had our first program-wide meeting, which was wonderful. It was the first time that everyone got a chance to see everyone else, and it was truly remarkable. We left lots of time in this venue that was only about 15, 20 miles from campus, but far enough away you couldn't go back to your office, because that was one issue. That we left time so that when we broke for coffee, every time I looked up, there were groups scattered around the room, outside by the posters, just talking. I didn't know you did that over in biology. You mean you guys at the vet med school have that stuff? You mean we can actually do that here at Auburn? I didn't know we had that equipment. Those kinds of conversations are absolutely critical. And then finally, I use this term matchmakers. These are people who serve that function of putting two people together. In our case, the associate deans for research at each college have a critical role to play here because they understand what's going on in each college, and they're involved in our program. We've ensured that they have a direct route to the program. A couple of them serve as ex officio members of our governing board, so they know on a day-to-day basis what's going on in the program, what's happening. They read most of the grants, for example. Leverage is very important. This is, I think, an important concept. We talk about encouraging departments and the university, departments, colleges, and the university to invest in the same things we're investing in. That way, not only are we putting money into a grant to fund an investigator, but the department head has put money into that grant. That means the department head is invested in the outcome of that research. The dean of the college is invested, and the entire university is invested. And having that investment, that financial investment, which means an emotional and an intellectual investment, is critical because we want everyone to support the process. So let me give you a quick example, what's called our major grants program. This is real money. This is $200,000, $100,000 a year for 2 years. That gets people's attention. This must be interdisciplinary. There's simply no question about it. The reviewers have a requirement for that. It must be led by a PI with a track record. What we're doing is we're asking the most successful people, the people who will be most likely to get extramurally funded, to use this money. But it has to be in a team environment where they're building co-team members who are learning the process. So in a way, this is our grantsmanship training environment where we use that leader who has the experience to write a grant to now help train assistant professors, associate professors who haven't been out there getting grants in ways in which they can get grants. And they're successful internally, so they have a grant. They are a co-I on this grant. They've seen the process. And hopefully that builds them to the point where they can become successfully extramurally. In this particular instance, we're putting all the money on the table, no leverage required from anyone else. But the way the process worked was really sort of interesting and surprising in some ways to me. Because the first thing we did was we had a pre-proposal meeting where if you wanted to be a PI, you had to show up. And then we sent out the invitation to everyone else that said, if you're interested in participating, please show up with a 5-minute PowerPoint. PIs, what your project is. Everybody else, what your ability is, what your technology is, what your thought is, what your system is. I walked over to that meeting for the first time with this kind of quivering heart, thinking, God, I hope there's at least 5 people there. Walked into a room with more than 40 people in it. It was like, wow, that's pretty cool. I wonder what they think they're going to get. We had 2 hours of 5-minute presentations. And at the end of that, exactly what I wanted to see happen. That room did not leave. all of the people who were there broke into little groups spontaneously. We didn't set it up. We didn't tell them they had to get into groups or anything else. These were all people saying, wow, I need that technology. You in chemical engineering, you're doing three-dimensional cell culture that mimics tumor architecture. I'm doing 2D cell culture and trying to look at the effect of circular. That's not going to work. I need your 3D system, and I need it now because I need it in my pre-proposal. And that's what happened. We put these groups together. We've done this twice now, and the second time worked just like the first time. These people showed up, talked about what they were interested in, and collaboration started happening. So we didn't put them together and say, you have to collaborate. We gave them an environment in which they could recognize, these very bright people could recognize what they needed and what they could get. We then do a pre-proposal review where we look at our pre-proposals and make suggestions back to the PIs and teams. And then the proposal review is basically like an NIH panel or an NSF panel. We sit down, we have a panel meeting, the grants are presented in exactly the same way. The only difference is that typically, we fund about 3 of these a year, and in both iterations that we've done to date, only 1 proposal has been funded straight up. Only 1 proposal has been judged adequate. 2 more proposals have gotten the kind of boot back, hey, you know, this is really good, but not good enough. Please fix it and return it. You have a month. And those have then been funded subsequently. And then, of course, we have award monitoring, and obviously, we want them to present their data, and our annual meeting is one place to do that. So here's a great example of how this works. This is another clinical trial. This is a basic scientist, a guy who works on cell cycle, who had an idea. And it moved all the way through the pathway to get to a vaccine for breast cancer in dogs, patients that have existing breast cancer. So this is a preventative, or rather a therapeutic vaccine, not a preventative vaccine, that treats breast cancer in dogs. So in summary, fertilizer helps things grow. Money doesn't solve everything, but it sure helps. It's important. You can't do stuff like this without putting some money into the pot. That's what's going to get people's attention. You don't know what you don't know. Faculty members don't know what's going on in other places in the university, and oftentimes they don't know that they don't know that. So we have to increase that communication, that awareness level. People have to know what's going on. You've got to overcome that ignorance. And finally, as we say in veterinary medicine, herding cats is important. Faculty member are cats, they want to go off in their own direction. What you need to do is establish that border, those fences. We don't let people do whatever they want. We let them do focused things in cancer research. And I'll wrap it up there. Thank you. I'm told we have time for one question. That'll make it even faster. Oh. Is the business school involved with this? So the question is the business school involved with it? And they are one of the 3 who are not directly involved right now. I'm looking at the Dean of Business back there. One of my target 3. So no, I think that's a great question, and we are at the moment really focused much more on that preliminary pathway, but I think as we've all talked about here, that's not an excuse anymore. We need to be thinking about the ramifications as we go forward from the bench, from the very basic science. There needs to be that communication about ideas and ways in which things can move forward. So, excellent point. I've got another one real quick.
Just a quick question then. So it looks like you're ready to found another initiative. So for example, why don't you create an academic version of Match.com where you could get in touch and have entrepreneurial discussions, and maybe you could find a match for your research in a very structured way. I mean, so you could meet people you haven't met before. That's just an idea.
Good idea. All right, we'll leave it at that. Thank you all.